Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and today I'm going to show you how to make these beaded coils earrings. Now this is in addition to my other beaded coils pieces, so you can make a set if you want to. So if you want to learn how to make the earrings, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. The wire that I'm using is a 0.8mm regular round copper wire. And these beads here are some 4mm rounds. Now just make sure the holes in your beads are large enough to take the wire through. And finally, we need our earring findings as well, so I'm just using earring post and butterfly backs along with some jump rings. Of course, you can use whatever you prefer. And also you can check out the description box below the video for the material list and links you might need. Otherwise, let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. Now I'm not going to cut off any lengths of the wire. I'm going to use it still attached to the reel because it can be hard to know exactly how much we're going to need. Now to make my coils, I'm going to be using my 6-step bail making pliers because I'm going to use a certain step on there and I know I'm going to keep getting the same size coils. Whereas if you use round nose pliers, obviously you have the graduation, so they might make it more tricky. That's why I like to use these. So I'm going to be using the smallest step on my pliers here, and I then have my wires. So I'm just going to start working right towards the end, and I'm going to place my pliers onto the end of the wire. So you can just leave a short little tail there, just of about 1mm or 2. And then I'm going to literally just start coiling my wire around this step on my pliers. So I'm going to coil. So first of all, I get a full circle like that. But I'm going to obviously keep coiling because we need to make little clusters of coils. So what I'm going to do is make sure that my length of wire that's attached to the reel is coming below where the end is. Otherwise I'm just going to keep going around and around, and also making sure that my coils are tight next to each other. And then I want to count my rounds as well. So basically to the point where you would meet up with where the end is. Because obviously we need to make the right amount of rounds to fit with the bead. So what I would done yet, 1, 2, 3, 4. So with these beads here, I need to do 5. So I'm just going to need to do one more to bring it all the way around. And I have this wire obviously going in this direction, and just the very end of the wire is also kind of pointing out in this direction. So this is my first little, get that out, cluster of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is correct. Then we need to go on and make the next cluster. So I'm going to take the same step on my pliers, place them on my wire literally right next to that first cluster of the coils, right up against, and then clamp down, and I then bring it around to come to the other side, and then just continue to coil. And then what you'll see is on this side here, you'll see a longer length of wire kind of crossing over from the one side to the other, but then you just keep coiling below, again making sure they're nice and tight. And then we need to count the rounds here as well. So in this case we then need to count until the first cluster, or the previous cluster, in this case is the first one, it ends up on the left side here. So right now I have 4, so I need to go around again. And I need to end up with the length of wire here attached to the reel coming out in the same direction where the previous cluster is. And then I need to make sure I have 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is correct, and it's coming straight up to the side. So just taking this out. And then go on and make the next one. And this is where you can then use the first one, or the previous one prior to the one we just did, as a guide. So I basically put the step of my pliers into that first one, and then use that to know I need to then clamp down there, which then automatically is right next to the one we just made. And then you just want to continue constantly coiling in the same direction. And again, you want to count the same amount every time. And in this case here, this is now 3. Just on the third, because again we need to, the very previous one we just did, we need the wire that we're working with to come out in the same direction where that is. So basically it's ready for the next, to go to the opposite side and make the next cluster. So I just need to do one more and just take it out. You can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds, and my wire is going straight out to the side there, in the same, towards the same side where my previous cluster was. So I now have 3. And then next, you can put the pliers into the previous cluster, clamp down, and then just continue. And like I said, it's important to kind of get your coils nice and tight together. If you find that you kind of do a few, just get this one up a little bit, and they aren't quite close together, but you kind of ended up with a little bit of space between them, what you can do is take some chain nose or flat nose pliers, and then just, I personally prefer to do it while they're on the pliers here, so my 6W making pliers, you can then just squeeze together to basically tighten it up. You can also do, obviously, without the pliers in, but what we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the wires coming out in the direction to be ready for the next cluster. So this is now what you just want to keep doing, so get the length that you need to basically get the size of earring that you want. So now I kept making my coils here and I have the length that I want. Now the length that you make will determine the size of your earrings. So in this case here, I've made 20 coils on either side, which means 40 in total. So you can count it that way. And then what I want to do is now cut off the excess, because we don't need to use this wire anymore to make the coils like this. So I'm going to cut it off the reel. Now just cut it pretty close to where that very final coil is. Just leave a tiny little tail, if you could say. Just something like that. You can see it's just cut off there. And then we can just take our chain nose and basically just bring that little tail, instead of it kind of sticking out a little bit, just bring it inwards, more towards, facing into the middle of the coil a little bit. And of course you can just do that on the other end as well, where we started out. So just bring that in, just to kind of make sure they're not sticking out so they can catch on anything. Now once we made the coils, we need to cut a length of the same wire, and I have that here, and it's about 45 to 50 centimeters. So what we're going to do with this is put the two ends together. I'm going to use this to add the beads basically, because we need to find the midpoint. So just have the two ends together evenly, and I know the midpoint is down here. Now what I'm then going to do is take my 6W making pliers and use a smaller step, you can also use round nose pliers, and place that on that midpoint. And then we first of all just want to make a little loop, so just bring the two ends all the way so we get a full complete circle. So the ends of the wires here are basically more or less going out to the sides. So we have a full complete circle. And just bringing them down a little bit at an angle. And then we need to get the wires into position. So for that I want to use my chain nose pliers. And then we just need to, instead of having the wires coming out at this angle here from the loop, we need them to come straight down like that, or up, whichever way you look at it. And both of them in the same direction. So you want to place the pliers about where we need to put the bend, and then bend the wire so it's going to come straight out like that. You can always adjust it a little bit. Of course, do the same on the other side. And what we then want to do as well is make sure the distance is, just bring that, distance is going to suit basically these two lengths here, going through down all the coils, because that's what we're going to do. I'm going to have the loop then on one end, And then before we start using this wire here to go through the coils, you want to just make sure that they're as straight as possible, just to make it easier to bring them through. So make sure there's no kinks and bends if you can help it. So just smooth them out with your fingers to get them as straight as you possibly can. So when your wire is completely ready here, I'm going to then bring in the coils that we've already made, and we need to start bringing these through all the coils. And as we're doing that, we then obviously just need to add the beads as well. So we're doing that along the way, and before I actually bring it through, I need to add my very first bead, because if you look, we have a coil on one side, but on the other side is an open space, and we need to add beads between all the open spaces. So we first of all just need to add a bead that's going to sit in that first open space at the end. And then you need to make sure that when you start bringing the wires through, that side, the wire with the bead on, goes through the side with the open end, and the other one goes through on the other side. So like that. And then we need straight away our next bead to go into the gap on the other side. Now you'll find your own way probably of adding the beads. Just gonna bring it around here. You can just let that first bead as well, just let it drop down now that it's on there, so it doesn't kind of keep getting in the way. But then you can either bring the wire out through the hole and then add the bead. If I can just get it on there. Push that down to end up sitting in the gap, and then bring the wire back down the very end there, until you can then straighten it back out and push it through the next coil, which is then also going to already now start tightening it up, and you can see it then comes out in the next gap, so ready for the next bead. But I like to swap from side to side, so I've added the two first beads here. I then need to swap to the other side. You can also hold it however you want to, whatever's comfortable and works for you. So grabbing that next bead that needs to go in the next gap. So I just bring the wire down. You can also then do it this way, where you bring the wire down just so it comes out a little bit. Then I add the wire the bead into the gap. Kind of push it in there with the hole facing the right way, and it kind of slots right onto the wire, and you then just keep pushing the wire through, and it's gone through there, and it's now captured that bead in place. Flip to the next one. Next bead there, you can see I have a little bit already sticking out, and you're going to find it's the easiest here in the beginning. It does start to get a little bit harder, it can be anyway, because obviously the further you go, especially if it's a bit tight. But that's where it can also be handy then start using pliers at some point, where you actually start to help push the wire, because you can get more force and strength, you get better grip with the pliers than you can with your fingers. So you can start doing that at some point, bringing the wire through like that, as you can see. And now that's ready for the next one. So basically you just want to keep doing this all the way till you've filled out all the gaps till the other end. So now I have all my beads on here except for the very last one, because that one also is open on the end. So I'm just going to add that now. So you just add it on there and let it drop down, and then it sits into place. So now what we need to do is shape this before we can finish anything off. So I'm just going to make them teardrop shaped. It's up to you what you prefer, but that's just a shape that I'm going to do. So you literally just want to start bringing them into that shape. So in other words, I'm going to bring the two ends together. And the shape doesn't have to be perfect straight away, because it's going to probably go a bit out of shape while we're still working with it. So I'm just going to get the rough shape in place, and then I'm going to take the two ends there, or the wire that's going through everything, and then I want to put them through, not the loop itself, but just below the loop there, right above that coil and that bead, the very last ones. So push them through So they come out on the other side. Push them all the way through. You can pull them as well. And you can see as well, we kind of naturally get a teardrop shape. And then I'm just going to separate them. You're going to have one more on the left and one more on the right. And what you then want to do is make sure it's as tight as possible, and then keep them to the sides that they're coming out of, and then bring them back around again. Just do one at a time, and back through the same loop. It can be a little bit easier to use chain nose here. It's only a little space. Bring them back through. Pull on the other side. And then just pull that nice and tight and make sure it gets tight. So it's basically wrapping around the wire on the other end. You can help it by pushing it as well. And then also do the other side. Bring that through as well in the same way. In that same gap. Right through and come out on this side. And then just help pull it through. And again, you can help feed it just to get it nice and tight. So you want to get the wrap here as tight around the wire it's wrapping around as possible. I'm going to push it with my pliers. The other one here can just pull a little bit. As you can see, I can get a much better grip on the wire by grabbing onto it with my pliers than I can if I use my fingers. Now I want to make sure as well that this hasn't come apart. So pull down. It's still sitting how I want it to. And then just wrap it around. Tighten those wraps up nicely. If anything needs to be adjusted, do it as you go. So you still have a chance to do it. And then otherwise, I'm just going to bring them around over the top again, but I'm not going to bring them through, and you probably won't be able to because you kind of filled out the space. So I'm just going to bring them over the top as if I was wrapping around and going through the little space again. But what I'm then going to do instead is cut off the excess and just leave a short little tail. Both ends, and then just take your pliers and squeeze them down. So make sure the end gets kind of tucked in, so it's not up by the loop, but it gets tucked away nicely so it doesn't catch on your hair or anything. And of course the other one as well. And then you have your loop here. You can always just straighten that out a little bit. That is then the loop I'm going to use to attach my earring findings to. So you can just use jump rings for that. And then you just go back, and this is where you can then just adjust the shape. You can easily do that. So straighten out and get the teardrop shape you want. And then of course, you want to make another one of this and then end up in the exact same position, and you just attach your earring findings to the top loop there. So these are my beaded coils earrings. Now you can make them to match my previous beaded coils bracelet and ring, so you can get a complete set. So I'm going to have a playlist featuring all the beaded coils jewellery, so you can easily find it, and there's going to be a link to it in the description box below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.